Om. 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 Vakratunda Mahakaya Suryakoti Samaprabha Nirvignam Kuru Me Deva Sarvakaryeshu Sarvada Saraswati Namastubhyam Varade Kamarupini Vidyarambham Karishyami Siddhir Bhavtu Me Sada Gurur Brahma Gurur Vishnu Gurur Devo Maheshwarah Guru Sakshat Param Brahma Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha.
Namaste everyone. Welcome to the evening show of the Singapore Festival on Hinduism, proudly organized by the Hindu Center. This evening's program is brought to you by Hindu Center in partnership with the Hindu Youth Network, established under the auspices of the Hindu Endowment Board. This evening, we are going to look at the power of women in Hinduism. Now, gender equality is no new concept to Hinduism. Women in Vedic times were accorded with equal opportunities and responsibilities. And there are renowned female sages, literature correctors, and Vedic scholars revered by the Hindu community worldwide. Today, Losheini, Vinodhinee, Thyagarajan, and myself, Karthik, we will share with you the role and intelligence of women in Vedic times using mythologies and historical narratives as case studies. Before we begin, let me introduce the speakers and myself. I'm Karthik and I work in the civil service. I've been a teaching volunteer and center lead for Hindu Endowment Board Project Bhakti classes since 2014. I'm also a committee member of the Hindu Studies Committee set up under HEB, and I've been a Hindu counseling volunteer with Hindu Center's Mitra Counseling Program at the Singapore Prison Service since 2017. And I'm also currently the co-chairperson of the Hindu Youth Network, Singapore, established under HEB. Joining me is Losheini Ravindran, a research scholar. She's currently pursuing her Master of Art at the National University of Singapore, and she has keen interest in bi-ethnic identities and interreligious relations. I also have Vinodhinee with me. Vinodhinee has been exposed to spiritual teaching since the age of 4 through her parents and is a student of His Holiness Swami Paramananda and His Holiness Swami Dayananda. She has been involved in organizations like Youth for Dharma, CHYK, Hindu Center, Gita Jayanti, and Hindu Youth Network. She's a chartered accountant by profession, and she works for the private sector in Singapore. Now back to today's topic, women in Hinduism. One of the most profound attributes of Hinduism is actually the recognition and worship of the divine as feminine. In fact, if you see, Hinduism is one of the major religions, that has worshipped divine in female form and continues to do so today. Many Hindus revere the divine energy or Shakti through its personification in a goddess, right? Many festivals such as the Navaratri, Vijayadashami are wholly dedicated to goddesses. While social practices have not lived up the Hindu ideal of gender equality and mutual respect, Hinduism remains one of the few major religions in which women have occupied and continue to occupy some of the most respected positions in spiritual leadership. So for the first segment where I'm going to present on, I'm going to give you a ringside view of women in Vedic culture. And thereafter, we will have Vinodhinee, who will share with you some of the iconic women in Hinduism. And then we have Losheini, who will wrap it up by bringing you interesting characters, highlighting interesting characters featured in our mythologies and Puranas as well. So without further ado, let me begin with my presentation, but let me first share the slides with you guys. All right, got it. Okay, so in the vision of the Vedas, the essential nature of a human being is of the nature of limitlessness, right? There's no limit to our highest self I'm talking about. And the Upanishads actually describe this nature very well. It says, the nature of the self is actually to be imperceptible and devoid of attributes, such as color, form, and gender. So the self is neither spatially limited nor bound by the time. And the discovery of oneself in the light of this vision is known as moksha, liberation, right? And this freedom, which is one of the highest goal in the Arthashastras, if you look at it, the four different goals, the discovery of oneself in the light of this vision is known as, which is known as moksha, it's the ultimate end of a human being. And you know what? It's actually open to both men and women. There's no biasness in that. So thus the Vedas actually fundamentally does not bar women from Vedic learning and the pursuit of moksha. And the stories of learned women like Kargi, the daughter of sage Vachaknu, and Matreyi, the wife of sage Yajnavalkya, stand as evidence to this fact. In fact, in the Rig Veda, it has many hymns attributed to women seers like the Brahma Vardinis, such as Gosa, Goda, and Apala. Further, the Rishi Tarpana itself, if you look at the offering of water to sages, right? These actually include three women seers, Kargi, Vadava, and Matreyi. So women actually have always played a key role, and they have been always given equal opportunity, and there's no doubt about that. Now, let's look at three different aspects of women's life, of women's access, women's opportunities in the Vedic times. So let's take a look at the women's access to Vedic learning, right? So both men and women always had access to Vedic learning. And this is seen in the educational samskara of called the Upanaya. It's like an initiation kind of a process. And it's actually performed for both of them. The scriptures, Smriti actually does include initiations for girls, initiations for guys. So there's no gender biasness or gender inequality there. The scriptures also states that the girls are qualified for this initiation and they are entitled to perform Vedic rituals and study the Vedas. In fact, the Yama Smriti has a verse that says girls should be given access to the teaching of the Vedas and initiation into the Gayatri mantra. So the Smritis, so that's the level of access given to women for Vedic learning. There's no limitation in that sense. Now, if you look at the other aspect of marriage and inheritance, right? The Smritis such as the Yajna, Valkya, and Vishnu, the Smritis here are referring to the key characters here. They actually qualify the widow to inherit the family property at the demise of their husbands. When there's especially no male progeny, all right? And in the in a particular Upanishad called I'm not sure I'm pronouncing correctly, but pardon me, it's Brahadaranyaka. That Upanishad, in that Upanishad, sage Yajnavalkya equally divides his entire wealth and property between his two wives when he decides to actually pursue the sannyasa path. And even if you look at in the context of marriage, right, among the 8 systems of marriage recognized by the Smritis, the Brahma marriage, which is considered to be the most exalted, in this marriage, the elders in the bridegroom's family actually visit the bride's parents, and they seek their daughter, seeking their daughter in marriage. And the fact that the girls are always sought after by the boys' parents reveal that women had a respectable place in the society. And money transactions had no role in the marriage settlement. So it's unlike today's circumstance where you actually see people, we call it dowry, right? Like, oh, how much are you going to give? It often, not in today's context, women are, I wouldn't say objectified, but rather treated like an entity that can be used for money transaction. It's something that has, I'm not sure, probably different cultural influences have brought this up. But if you go back to our Vedic times, this was not in place at all. And in the Grahastha Ashrama context also, a man actually commits himself to living a life of dharma with his wife. And the word patni, meaning wife, etymologically actually refers to that woman who's married to a man through or for the sake of yajna, Vedic ritual. It therefore means that she is one who will qualify the man for performing the rituals. So in a way, right, the wife is the one that's enhancing the man's eligibility criteria, if I may use that word. So the wife is always related to the husband through the Vedic ritual and is always entitled to participate in and share the fruits of the rituals performed by her husband. So that's on the marriage and inheritance aspect. Now, if you look at the social status as well, in social life, women were also given equal status with men. Again, going back to the Brihadaranyaka Upanishad, it describes how a woman actually completes the existence of a man, just as the two halves of a shell make up a whole one, right? And in fact, the Manusmriti has a beautiful verse, and I would like to share that with you here at this point in time. It says, "Where women are honored, there the devas, the divine, is actually pleased. Where the women are not respected, there the rituals performed do not give rise to the results." So for centuries, women were looked upon as the repositories of our family traditions, Kula Dharmas. They played a significant role in maintaining and handing down the family and social traditions to the following generations. The society was also looked upon as strong only when the women were strong and protected. But in today's context, there's a clear disconnect between this philosophy, right, and the reality in many parts of the world. In practice, gender equality for women, not just in the Hindu society, but in other societies also has become so challenging. Though some parts of Hindu society are matriarchal or matrilineal, many women aren't treated as equals or accorded the dignity promised by the Hindu teachings. And this could be a consequence of evolving social practices, if I may say. So, for example, practices such as barring women from reading Vedic texts, prohibiting remarriage, or restricting property rights are not mentioned in ancient Hindu texts. So that's one big misconception that I would like to, at this point in dispel. And on the contrary, there are many Vedic era examples of women having the liberty to do all of these things. Instead, these patriarchal practices evolved culturally due to a number of factors. Some of the most prominent included the subjugation of women as a result of urbanizations and division of labor, the economic pressures placed on Hindu society as a result of invaders and wars, the spread of certain colonial practices which kind of prohibited a female inheritance, and the reformulation of the Hindu Dharma in a sense, with an emphasis on another foreign standards. All this have kind of influenced it, and today even the Sambradayas, have appeared to be quite male dominated. But so this is something that needs to change. People have to be educated in this area to uphold the dignity of women as visualized by the Vedas. A culture that has its basis in oneness, Advaita, cannot be in conformity with the idea of inequality between man and women. So on that note, next we have Vinodhinee, who's going to bring you exciting, and suitable examples of women back in the Vedic era who have demonstrated the liberty that they had. So without further ado, let me invite Vinodhinee Thyagarajan.
Namaste to everyone. Thank you, Karthik, for the introduction. As Karthik mentioned, today I will be covering women's saints from all over India. Many of these women, noteworthily, are wives of equally knowledgeable men or daughters of equally knowledgeable men. In some cases, they were even teachers of the men. This stands to say, again, like Karthik said, that women were given the same opportunity when it came to education. So to say that our culture does not give equal status to women could not be more wrong. So I will cover a few amazing women saints and icons from our culture. Just give me a minute to share my slide. Here it is. Okay, so you can see my slide, right? Yeah. The first person I will be covering, she's really an amazing woman, is Sharda Devi. She is the wife of one sec. Yes. She is the wife of Sri Ramakrishna Paramahamsa, and she was actually betrothed to him when she was just 5 years old. She played a very important role as the advisory head of a nascent organization, which finally became an organization devoted to social work, which we all know today as the Ramakrishna Mission. And when Ramakrishna Paramahamsa died, right, he told her that she would have to be the mother figure for his whole disciple and community. And she has had a hard life from beginning to end as a daughter, wife, And finally, as the beloved mother of the large community of people cutting across race and language, she had huge expectations and demands on her as her role. But what is remarkable is that in the midst of all these cares, first of all, only she could have performed it that well. But in the midst of all this, she maintained a degree of aloofness and renunciation. She performed this with tact and wisdom, but this aloofness and renunciation, she shared it in equal measure with her husband, if not more. Though through the skein of the varying situations which we faced, she remained absolutely calm and equipoised, as if there were no concern of hers. Her fortitude, courage, and wisdom amazed everybody, and she never once complained or started hankering, even when the disciples grew in a considerable manner. She advocated for education of women, though she was uneducated herself. And she is one person who led by example. And all these women are people who led more by examples than actually by advice or something. She doesn't have even a single book to her credit, but to this day she's worshipped in every Ramakrishna mat. And this one, she was actually Swami Vivekananda wrote a letter to her telling about his intention to attend the Parliament of Religions, and only after receiving her blessing, he decided to go ahead with it. She has a lot of best quotes to her credit, but the one which I found very favorite and very practical for us to follow is this: I tell you one thing. If you want peace of mind, do not find fault with others. Rather, see your own faults. Okay. So that is Sharada Devi for you. Going ahead to the next one is Ubhay Bharati. She is one of my favorite female characters in our culture, and she's considered as an incarnation of Goddess Saraswati. She's the wife of Mandana Mishra, and they were both known as one of the most learned couple. Adi Shankaracharya was told to go and meet this special couple, by another scholar whose name was Kumarila Bhatt. It is said that Mandana Mishra and Adi Shankara had deliberations in which Ubhay Bharati was made the moderator because she was the only person who exhibited the same amount of knowledge as the two of them. And even among the husband and wife, Mandana Mishra and Ubhay Bharati, their conversations used to be about all this, the scriptures and everything. So they were, and in the continuing with that story, they were both given a garland, Mandana Mishra and Adi Shankaracharya, and whosoever garland doesn't wither in the end would be declared as the winner. And though both were equally knowledgeable, Mandana Mishra's garland had started withering. This is because he was agitated, he was getting agitated and angry, and he had not internalized his wisdom. At the end, Ubhay Bharati, though a devoted wife and all that, she still declared Adi Shankaracharya to be the winner. And there is one backstory of Ubhay Bharati, a folklore which many people would not have heard, but because of which she came to be known as Goddess Saraswati, as an incarnation of Goddess Saraswati, and also I think it gives us an insight into how knowledgeable she was. So one day, it seems Ubhay Bharati was going to the river with all of her women friends and women disciples, and she saw an ascetic, which is a sannyasi or a monk, was sleeping on the wayside, and he was resting his head on a water jug. Yeah, water jug. Yeah, and he was using it as a pillow, and he was holding onto it tight, ensuring that nobody took it away. And she shared with her female disciples that, okay, look at that ascetic. He has like seemingly renounced everything, but he has still not given up his attachment to his water jug. And she told this wantedly within the hearing of the ascetic. And on hearing these words, he got enraged, and he thought, is a mere woman entitled to teach me as to how I should behave? So you see this, he thought like this, that thing came. While she returned from there, he threw the jug at her feet, and he said, now see how renounced I am, that I gave up my jug. So she said, oh, so you're not only filled with attachment, but you're also filled with ego now. I can see that. Then on hearing these words, this ascetic, the monk, he ran up to her and fell at her feet and pleaded for forgiveness of his faults. And according to Sri Nochur Venkatraman's biography on Adi Shankaracharya, Bharati became Adi Shankaracharya's disciple. But there are also other, and she proceeded with him to Sringeri when he actually consecrated our Sharadamba. And she is also considered that as a this one essence of Sharda itself. And aside to that, her husband Mandana Mishra, he became a primary disciple of Adi Shankaracharya, Sri Shureshwaracharya, and who was the first seer of Sringeri Mutt, the southern Mutt of Adi Shankaracharya. So both of them, according to different variations as such, but both of them finally became disciples of Adi Shankaracharya. So that shows that there was no difference whatsoever in this. And we can see that women were held in high esteem for their scholarship and erudition, and also more so because that they are impartial and fair-minded, which is why she became the moderator in that debate. The third one is Avayar. She actually Avayar per se, there were more than one Avayar. They say one was in the Sangam age and the other was in the Chola age. So Avayar in Tamil literally means a respectable woman. Um, the Sangam age Avayar, she lived during the Sangam period and is contemporary of the Tiruvalluvar of Tirukkural, and she has apparently written 33 verses in our Sangam literature, Purananuru, and also some 4 or 5 in Agananuru as well. So she traveled from one part of the country to another and from one village to another, and she shared the gruel of poor farmers, composing songs for their enjoyment. And she was also very close with the Jain chieftain of the village and all. So this is the Sangam age of Vayar. And legend has it that the Jain king Atyaman, he gave her a gooseberry. Somebody gave him a gooseberry because he was such a good king and they wanted him to live very long. But he apparently gave it to her because he thought that she was more deserving, and if she could live forever, our culture and heritage would live forever. So Chola age Avaya, the Avaya that we all, I think, is we all know more, we are more familiar with. She was the contemporary of Kambar, the one who is the author of the Tamil Ramayana, and she found great happiness in the life of small children. So her works like Artichuri, which is like very, very, very short, like even young children can start saying them, but powerfully packed with messages that young children and people very old can follow. She also wrote many other books like Muturai, Nalvali, and all that. So some quotes from the Artichuri I would like to say. So இயல்வது கரவேல். So it's like there are alphabets in Tamil, right? E. So she gave each for each alphabet she gave. So this way we can also make sure our kids by heart the alphabets. So இயல்வது கரவேல். This is something that I like. Help others based on your capacity. It's like you should also you should also keep in mind your capacity and help. And there was also one more thing that I like, which is ஊக்கமது கைவிடு. So never give up your enthusiasm. Whenever you're doing something, the enthusiasm, you should go at it with full force. So she's the one who wrote these things. And she's also very respected among I learned this the first time because there is her quote which says "Katrathu kayalavu, kalladadu ulagalavu." So which means what you've learned is a mere handful and what you haven't learned is the size of the world. And it seems it is exhibited at NASA this one is exhibited in NASA and quoted in NASA. So I think that shows how far her teachings are taken seriously and followed by people all over the world. So it's definitely a treasure for us. The next one I would like to go ahead with. Good slide. Yeah, is Mirabai. Mirabai is one of the brightest stars in the Bhakti movement, right? We are she's I think for she's a Rajput princess and she was an empress among God's devotees and principles. She was fixed upon she's one of those people who had like taken God to be her consort. So she had decided that she's married to Muralidhara, that is Krishna, and it's like Andal and the legendary gopis, she considered God to be her husband even after having a mortal husband. And she became an ardent devotee of Krishna when she was just 3 years old. When I think when she was watching a procession of a marriage, she asked her mom, "Who's going to be my bridegroom?" And then she said Kanha. So she's Kanha, as in Krishna will be your bridegroom. And so that had taken a place in her mind. She continued to offer unloyal devotion to Krishna till the end of her life. All the while she was singing and dancing before him, and her audience comprised sadhus and other devotees. Again, these things I'm stressing more because she, being a woman, she had a great following of irrespective of caste, gender, creed, everything. And she has in her compositions she has mentioned about her trials and tribulations, not by way of complaint, but to illustrate that her Lord has never given up on her. He has stood by her at every crisis of life. And she addressed Krishna by so many names, and she's very talented because one thing is composing, but she also set tunes for her own music. She's a composer in her own might. And when because her in-law side, I think her husband passed within like a decade or something. And at that time this sati was very famous, but she didn't do it because she told that she's married to Krishna and she's not married to any mortal. So she didn't do it. In that sense, she did defy the norms, but she had her reason to do it. And but the in-law side were not so supportive at that time. So when they made it almost impossible for her to worship Krishna, she considered it the last straw and she left the place. And she set out on a Tirth Yatra of Bhagavan Krishna, and all the way through talking about his Leela when he was a baby, and Bal Krishna, and the killing of Putana, this everything she did that. And her death in Dwaraka when I think she was about 70 years old, or I think 67 to be exact, yeah. And she apparently she went inside the mandir, and she didn't come out at all. And she sums up her spiritual message in one of her favorite kirtans. I like on the one particular portion of that is satsang no ras chak prani. O bring savor the fruit of satsang. In the beginning it may be bitter, but as time goes on it will become as sweet as a mango. Don't you be proud of this body. In the end it will be reduced to ashes. If you resort to satsang, you can have mukti, as the Vedas proclaim. Meera says you take refuge in God's feet, and that is possible through a good company or satsanga. So she's, like I said, a star of the bhakti movement, one of the stars. The next one is our, I would say, the South Indian counterpart of Meera. She's Andal, and she's the only female saint in the Vaishnava tradition, actually. And she captures interest due to the sheer force of her poetry and her dramatic life that had nothing but bhakti in it. And she's one of the 12 alvars. Like I said, alvars are people are known as the followers of Vaishnavism, the star bhaktas of Vishnu. So Vishnu Chitta was her foster father, and he located her near a Tulsi garden when he was because he was a gardener, and he used to make garlands for the murti in this one. So as an avid gardener, he grew flowers and plants, and he found her near a tulsi plant. And he and his wife adopted her. They were very happy to have her. They didn't have child also, that one. And they named her Kodai or Goda in Sanskrit. And Kodaish proved to be an apt pupil of her learned father. Like I mentioned in the beginning, they were wives, or they were some of them are daughters of very learned men. So he learned and soon mastered the scripture, mythology, philosophy, everything under his tutelage. Her love for the divine grew day by day, and she was the author of this Tirupavai. And Vishnu Chitta is also known as the Periyalvar, and she accompanied her father on his regular pilgrimages to shrines of Vishnu all over Srivilliputtur. And Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita, Masanam Margashirshoham. So the whole that he's Margari in this one. So I don't know, I can't help but connect that with Andal because we chant Tirupavai every during every this one. So and I think Ramanujacharya was struck by the very first stanza where Andal declared Narayane Namakku Parai Taruvan. So Lord Narayana alone can give us redemption and happiness. So he that she says that he's the supreme absolute real light and he alone can bless us and we alone can get blessed. Namakke Parai Taruvan. That's the only way to get the blessings. That's what she says. It's noteworthy that poet Kannadasan said, "Andal Tamil Andal." So she ruled the language of Tamil. And going back to the story, her life took an unforeseen turn when she grew older. One day, the priest at the temple found a long strand of hair in the garland bought by Vishnu Chitta, her father. And he immediately informed Vishnu Chitta of this sacrilege. And the furious father confronted his daughter, and she confessed that she was wearing the garland every day, admiring herself in the mirror, imagining herself to be Sri Ranganatha Swami's bride before handing it over to the unsuspecting priest. And Vishnu Chitta was so shaken by this incident that he did not make garlands for a few days. The episode culminated in Ranganatha Swami himself appearing in Vishnu Chitta's dream and asking him why there had been no garlands for him recently. And when he told him about his daughter's misdeed, um, they say that Swami told him in the dream that didn't you realize that the fragrance of the flowers were enhanced after Koda wore the garland? I keep referring to her as Koda because she never referred to herself as Andal, and she would like to be known only as Vishnu Chittan's Kodai. Vishnu Chittan as her father. She she respected her acharya and she will approach the Lord only through her father. So these messages are indirectly conveyed through the story where the garland is handed over to the father and then the father is the one going and taking it to this one. So she showed that the acharya is the ultimate one, and for her prayer and service to the Lord was the ultimate purushartha, and not for her. She didn't want liberation from the cycle of birth and death in the conventional sense. She would like to be born any number of times to enjoy Krishna, the company of Krishna, along with the gopis. Ettaikum ஏழ் பிறவைக்கும் உடனோடு உற்றோமே ஆவோம் உனக்கே நாம் ஆட்சேவோம். The last one, another grandmother of of our town. This one is Karaikal Ammayar. She's one of the three saints. So we saw Alvars. Alvars are the followers of Vishnu, and Naimars are the followers of Shiva. And Karaikal Ammayar is, I think there are only three in the 63 Naimars, and she's one of them. And she's considered one of the greatest figures of the Tamil literature. She was born in Karaikal, which was a maritime center. And Ammayar was a great devotee of Lord Shiva, and she was named as Punitavadi first. As a young girl, she had chanted Namah Shivaya, the mantra of Lord Shiva, several times every day, and took care of the devotees of Shiva coming to her village. Later, she married a person called Paramadattan, son of a wealthy merchant. So this is where the story comes. Like one day, her husband sent her 2 mangoes to be kept for him. And that day, a hungry Shiva devotee came to her residence. And as we saw before, she's used to serving Shiva devotees, and she likes doing that even as a young girl. So lunch was not ready. So Punitavati, she gave the guest curd rice and one of the mango. And later, when the husband came home and she served a mango, he asked for a second. She was at a loss and she prayed to Lord Shiva. And suddenly a mango appeared at her hands. And when she served it to her husband, he found it extremely delicious and compared to the previous one and asked her how she got this food. And since he was not religious, she was scared of revealing the truth. But then when she told him this happened, he didn't believe her. He asked her to bring one more, and she brought one more. And then he realized that his husband is actually that her husband realized that she's actually not a normal birth, she's a divine birth, and he started worshipping her as a goddess. So this is and she understood about this about her husband, and then she prayed to God to deprive her of the physical charm and have a demoniacal form. And her prayer was immediately granted, and her charming, youthful body was transformed into a skeleton. She became a fiery form of Kali. And she went to Mount Kailash, walking all the way on her hands. And even to this day, walking on hands has become a very popular ritual, and it is associated to Karikal Ammayar. So it's amazing and noteworthy as to how these women, in their pure devotion to the Lord, created their own legacy. Sharada Devi, as a quiet karma yogi, performing her duties with mindful detachment. Bharati as the excellent moderator who found happiness purely in her knowledge, and Avaya, who was one of the few women poets of her era. Mirabai, who found her happiness in being wed to the Lord, and Andal, whose actions, though not customary, became a custom after, and finally Ammayar, who took a Gaulish form but is still worshipped to this day. It goes to show that in the eyes of the Lord, a devotee is a devotee, and only the intentions behind the actions matter. If anything is done with pure devotion, irrespective of all the other details, Ishvara recognizes it and showers his praise to us. Thank you.
Thank you, Vinodhinee. Thank you so much for the excellent presentation. Now, I'm pretty sure our audience would have understood the 6 icons that you have mentioned: Karikal Ammayar, Andal, Mirabai, and so on. I think they were very interesting, inspiring figures, I would say, for both men and women as well, in terms of their contributions to not just expressing their bhakti, but also to the literature, bhakti literature. They have also contributed quite a significant amount of it. So that's very amazing and encouraging as well. Now, moving on to Losheini, she's going to introduce the key characters, as well as key personalities. I think we received a question whether whether there are there examples of female rulers or queens who were from the who belong to the Hindu faith, and how readily they were accepted. I'm pretty sure, as Losheini shares some of the historical narratives as well as the mythologies, that would give you a brief sight of some of these queens and female rulers that we have had. So over to you, Losheini.
Thank you so much, Karthik. I'll just share my screen. Okay, first of all, good evening, everyone, and thank you for the opportunity. Today, I think we've thus far heard really insightful sharing from Karthik and from Vinodhinee, and I've been really humbled by the examples that they have cited as well to show how women of the different periods were way ahead of their times. So women, why are we immersed in the talks of them today? So linking to the previous discussions that we have had, I would like to share a bit more about the world of Wonder Women, whom I deem them to be, which is Shakti. And we'll be looking at women from Puranic and historical narratives and see what are the implications they had for the society, for the world of spirituality, and for us as lessons as a whole. And so first, I just want to quickly cover this portion of Puranams, right? So what is a Purana about? And I got reminded of this phrase, which says, Pura eva navam. So old is new. Why it is being said as such is because the ideas in Puranas continue to be perennial concerns or values that are reinstated even in today's world. And in the book of the Purna Vidya, it states that Puranas portray the eternal truths of Vedas metaphorically through the confluence of historical and mythological allusions, right? So Puranas basically comprise of 5 aspects, wherein lies the origin of the creation, the cyclic nature of creation, and genealogies of kings, sages, etc., as well as the history of the solar and lunar dynasties. So stories in Puranas, unlike Itihasas, are independent of each other, right? Whereas for Itihasas, they focus on a particular lineage when talking about those narratives. And of course, you have among Puranas, you have Upapuranas, Sthala Puranas, and Mahapuranas, which we will be also dealing about as we progress. So just a quick disclaimer, there may be variations in the different narratives we may heard, but nevertheless, it's always open for discussion. Right, since women are profoundly precious, 20 minutes will not suffice, but I will be mainly looking into 4 aspects of understanding women, and I will promise to keep it as concise as possible. So when I was thinking about what to talk for women in the Puranas and historical narratives, I got reminded of 4 aspects that have been commonly dealt with in Hinduism. And that is really about this multifaceted magnanimity we see in the women figure. And that leads us to 4 questions for today, which is, what is motherhood? How do we address it? What is purity? What is leadership? And what is love? And one thing that we need to bear in mind as we progress is the idea that women are all pervading, all encompassing, and all knowing. Moving on to motherhood, I first wanted to start off with a quick story that I heard in one of the pravarchanas that I've watched. And this is the story about the mother who prayed for help. So the story goes that once upon a time, a priest in a temple used to often notice a woman who would come to the temple and she would pray that she should go to hell as soon as possible. And the priest used to be very dumbfounded as to why she was praying for that. And given her situation, she knew that she was going through a lot of struggles in this birth. And he decided to one day ask her, ma'am, why are you praying for hell when you yourself are going through so much in this birth of your life? And for that, the mother replied, sir, I have a son, and this son of mine is not a man of values. Unfortunately, he has been a rogue, and he has caused so much of atrocities to the place we are at. And she continues saying that, as a mother myself, I know that no matter what, my son is definitely going to go to hell for all his sins. And she says, if my son goes to hell, he will be all alone there, right? Because even here in the society itself, people don't like him, and he's going to face punishments in hell. So he will be alone and he will be helpless. So I'm praying for this because I will be then available to be there for him in hell before he reaches hell itself. So you can kind of see how in this story, that very altruistic nature of a mother, the selflessness, in spite of knowing that your child did not do good deeds, the care and the love, it's very inherent to mothers, which is why the whole idea of mother as something divine is often ascribed to women in Hinduism. So moving on, we have a lot of mothers in the Puranas, and I just thought of raising two interesting characters in this regard that we might not have commonly spoken about. And one of them is Anjana Devi. She is the mother of Hanuman, which is why Hanuman is also known as Anjaneya. And she's also the wife of the chief, Vanara chief Kesari. And it was through penance that she actually got Hanuman. People always, people who in religious discourses, they always say it is not about just having a kid, it's about doing penances and having a certain devotion and effort to pray for a child who's not just a child to them, but who contributes to the society for the well-being of the world at large, which makes the birth valuable. And likewise for Anjana, she spends time taking penance, and when Hanuman is born, the way in which a mother raises her child becomes very important, because that in the end develops Hanuman into someone who is 100% devoted, or beyond devoted to Rama himself, and he actually becomes of a great service to the Almighty, which is something significant to note. And that is where motherhood is a very important feature in any child's upbringing. And we also have the case of Vinita. The story of Vinita and Kadru appears in the Mahabharata, and it's a very interesting story because it really talks about how patience is a very important virtue in motherhood. And we can see it in the case of Vinita, whereby she and her sister Kadru, who are married to the same husband, same rishi, actually asked for a boon to be mothers of valiant sons. And for Vinita, she has 2 eggs, and for Kadru, she has thousands of eggs of snakes that she has wished for, and her eggs hatch very soon. And when Vinita notices that her eggs have yet to hatch, she gets very much apprehensive about the situation. And out of that impatience, she kind of cracks the egg, thinking that her child might need help. And when that happens, you have a half-formed shape of a child that comes out. And that is known as what we know today as Aruna, becomes the charioteer of Surya Deva. And you kind of see how that lack of patience has become a learning point for Vinita, where later she waits for a long time before Garuda emerges. So it kind of teaches us about the idea of how it is very much important for the mother to hold on to the values she believes in, because it will always have implications for her child as well. And in this regard, we kind of move on to the next mother whom we should definitely talk about. And she's mentioned in the Srimad Bhagavatam itself. And It's very beautiful when we talk about Mother Yashoda, right? In fact, in this verse, if I may just elaborate quickly, it talks about how karmantara niyuttasu nirmamanta swayam dadhi yani yani ha geetani tat bala charitani cha dadhi nirmantane kali smaranti tani agayata. So basically what they're saying is Mother Yashoda, while being engaged in her daily duties of churning the yogurt, she thinks and recollects the ways and the activities of a child, Sri Krishna, and she remembers him through in the form of chants, in the form of songs as she chants. And this is a very beautiful description, because it really shows about how amidst the everyday activity, mothers are always mothers, right? Because they are always thinking of their child, and that itself kind of becomes a form of bhakti in itself. And the reason why this happens is there's a very beautiful portion in the Srimad Bhagavatam that it's mentioned about Yashoda, Mata Yashoda, and it is stated that what happens in a short anecdote is that Krishna gets playful as a child, and Mother Yashoda tries to kind of teach him a lesson, to tell him that what he's doing is not right, and that he's being playful, and she decides to tie him to a mortar as a punishment. And the beautiful thing is, whenever she looks at him, she can't think of punishing him, even though she knows that she needs to, because each time she sees Krishna, she only feels like hugging him. The motherly instinct comes out there. And another beautiful thing is when she tries to tie Krishna down, this is a very interesting thing once again, if you think a bit further, because Krishna is not just Krishna. We are talking about someone who people revere as Akilanta Koti Brahmanda Nayaka. He is boundless, he's limitless. Can you tie him down to something? So true enough, when Yashoda tries to tie Krishna, she notices that the rope was getting shorter. She just can't tie. And she realizes, and she gets very tired. And when Krishna sees his mother, Yashoda, tired, he himself allows him to be tied. Right? And this is a beautiful thing, because as Kamala Subramaniam very beautifully mentions in a translation of the Srimad Bhagavatam, the only rope that can tie down the Almighty, the all-pervading, is the rope of bhakti. And for Yashoda, that bhakti oozes out in her in the form of motherhood, which is why even when as a mother's love is so empowering, that even the almighty, boundless, limitless being is being and allows himself to be tied down to the love. And that is really the beautiful relationship we can see between a mother and son, as evident between God and devotee, through this beautiful manifestation of a mother-child relationship. And of course, in the Sthala Purana, this is further elaborated, because we talk about Sri Vakula Devi, who adopts Srinivasa, whom we today know as the presiding deity of the Tirumala Tirupati Devasthanams. And the story of Venkateshwara also comes in the Varaha Purana as well, and also in the Sthala Purana of him. And in the story of Vakula Devi, it is said that Narada actually comes and has a conversation with her. And in that, Narada reminds her that, you are raising Srinivasa today because of a boon that you sought in your previous birth. And it is believed that Vakula Devi is a reincarnation of Mother Yashoda herself, because it is said that when Yashoda meets Krishna and when he's coronated, she asks him for a boon. He asks her to ask him for a boon, and she says that whichever birth I take, I always want to raise you. Right. And this is yet again a very insightful thing, because motherhood is not just about giving birth. It's about raising, it's about inculcating the right values to a child. And we can see how the love that Yashoda has for Krishna, it is so unconditional that she prays that she would be only, if she's ever born, she would be only born to raise him. And that happens again in the form of Sri Vakula and Srinivasa. And next we move on to what is purity. And when we kind of talk about that, this has been in a way a contentious topic, because you see a lot of different personalities or female characters that emerge in the Puranas. And when we talk about purity, we definitely have to talk about this classification about the idea of Panchakanyas, right? So there's a verse that says Ahalya Draupadi Sita Tara Mandodari Tatha Panchakanya Smare Nityam Mahapataka Nashanam. So basically it is said that remembering these 5 ladies, Ahalya Draupadi Sita Tara Mandodari, regularly, their character actually provides the strength to get rid one of their scenes and ill feelings. Now I have to also once again remind that characters like Anasuya and Savitri have also also been traditionally added onto the list. But for the scope of our discussion, I'll just keep it to this 5 people. And if you were to notice these characters, we always talk about them in relation to their male counterparts. For Ahalya, we talk about Gautama Rishi, we talk about Draupadi and the Pandavas, Sita, Rama, Vali, and Tara, and Mandodari. But understanding these women themselves as beings who are very independent, right? And women who were very clear about what they wanted to do in terms of their decisions, is very significant to note. And in the case of Draupadi, we saw a very resilient woman who was ready to fight against the oppression that she had faced in the Sabha. And in the case of Tara, she's not much spoken, in my opinion, in many talks, but yet again, she's a very important figure, because her purity was about not just devoting herself to being with her husband, but also advising him, right? She took on the position of an advisor and did tell Vali that some of his actions could be corrected, right? So we kind of see these types of women, and as well as Mandodari, right? She stayed by her husband's side throughout, in spite of all the challenges that she had seen. And sometimes people actually tend to ask, how can the idea Kanya itself talks about virginity. So they are saying, if they are married and if they have children, or how does that virginity come in? But yet again, Pradip Bhattacharya brings it very beautifully in his academic piece, that virginity is not just about a physical understanding, it goes beyond. And in that sense, if you were to think about it, these women were not indulgent in base desires, but they wanted to transcend beyond and understand themselves as a being, right, as a soul. And when you are on that path, then this kind of ideas of virginity and purity get challenged, and we can see it as evident from the Panchakanyas themselves. Looking at women in leadership, this is something that we definitely have to highlight, because we had a question from one of our friends who asked about women leaders, queens and so on. And I feel this is an apt topic to talk about yet again, because we kind of see how leadership is something very central when talking about women in all this Puranas and historical narratives. So this is a quick quote that talks about how women is a girl is equivalent to 10 sons. Very much that there's always been this timeless preference at times in some families for sons. But this quote really kind of demystifies the stereotypes, and it says about how a woman, a daughter, is equivalent to 10 sons, and whatever merits you earn with 10 sons can be already gained through raising one daughter. And I think this is very important, because we kind of learn about how a daughter is equal to 10 sons and not tension. So in that regard, you kind of see how they play a pivotal role in leadership itself, whereby they're not just a subservient figure, but they're also figures of empowerment. And first of all, before going on to the historical characters, I think it would be interesting to also look at the role of the Tridevi, right? They themselves are a reinstatement of women empowerment as well as leadership. As you can see, Saraswati, the goddess of knowledge, Lakshmi, goddess of prosperity, and Parvati, goddess of power. One way of understanding them is that, when we understand, we tend to always talk about the Trimurti, and then we think, okay, the three Devis are just the consorts of the Trimurti. But if you take one step beyond and think about it, Brahma, being a creator, in order to create, you need knowledge. And that's where you have the guidance of Saraswati. When you want to preserve, you need material. And that's where you have Lakshmi, who provides the prosperity. And when you want to destroy, you need power. And that's where you need the guidance of Parvati. So in this sense, these three Devis are really an amount of empowerment in that regard, because they kind of lead their male counterparts as well in their duties. And looking up at women in terms of historical narratives and so on, we have a few of them here, and I felt it was really they were really very interesting characters of their times. And one of them is Unniyarcha. Unniyarcha is basically mentioned in Northern Kerala ballads in 16th century. She is a woman who kind of fights against women exploitation, right? And you can see her wielding the sword. There are a lot of interesting narratives about her as well, but I'll keep it short in the interest of time. And you also have Rani Rashmani, who was one of those pioneers who fought for Indian independence, right? She was known by the name of Manikarnika and later as Rani Rashmani. And as a woman, she led her team, her kingdom, and she fought till the very end. And that resilience and that perseverance is something very significant when considering women in leadership. And we also have Rani Rashmani, it's her story is also an interesting story because she was born in a middle class, or rather a less wealthy family, and she got married to an influential person. And sadly, tragedy hits when her husband passes away, but she takes up the administrative duties and she deals with her husband's finances and properties. And being a Hindu woman herself, she also gets the instinct, the vision to actually construct a temple, which is popularly known as the Dakshineshwar temple today that we know of. And in that sense, in spite of, we have very much heard of narratives of women who have been oppressed or subjugated due to ideas of widowhood. But we see here a woman who, after her husband's demise, still chooses to stand on her own feet and lead herself in the path of spirituality and also leadership, where she takes charge of the affairs at home without simply shunning away from them. And that is something really amazing. And I thought of also talking about another figure from the Purana in this regard, Markandeya Purana, and it talks about this person called Madalasa. She's believed to be the daughter of Vishwavasu, and and she has a very interesting story also, because she's one of those very popular queens who decided to name her children with very strange names, right? So one of the popular ones is, so she had 4 sons, and her 4th child was named Alarka, which means mad dog. And her husband got a bit shocked because he's like, why do you name him with such an absurd name? It's what does the name mean? And that is where she talks about how, the name does not matter. She asks what's in a name, and she realizes that realizing the eternal self is key. And interestingly, we would have, maybe as children, we would have heard our mother singing lullaby to us, but Madalasa's lullaby to her children was very something really out of the world, where you kind of see a woman who is talking to her children at that very young age about the importance of self-realization. That would not be a typical lullaby by today's standards, but in those times itself, you kind of see a mother who kind of cradles her child by talking to them about things that are supposedly very profound for their age. And in due course, upon hearing her wise words, the 3 of the sons actually go into the spiritual path, while her husband tells her to actually lead at least one of the sons in administrative matters and in kingship, so that he's able to lead. And when that happens, Madalasa actually goes on to act to teach her son about what it is to rule. We always think about women complementing kings when it comes to ruling, but you have a woman here who teaches her son about leadership. And that is very important to take note of, because you see how that the woman here becomes a kingmaker herself. And that really shows about how much of impact women had in considering leadership itself as a whole. And next, we are going on to women and knowledge. When we talk about women and knowledge, we always think of Saraswati and so on. And that there are other goddesses in this regard that I will be talking about soon. But I just got reminded of this quote that says, "Sa vidya ya vimuktaye," which means true knowledge is that which leads to liberation. And that is really a very, very strong quote, because it talks about how many of us today associate knowledge with just education, right? We think about and we think that just learning the theory or learning what is it in the syllabus is true knowledge. But here itself is evident that that's not the only thing. It's about transcending whatever you have understood thus far in search of a deeper meaning to things that matter. So far we looked at 3 Devis. We might have also heard of the Navadurgas as well. But today I just wanted to quickly talk about what we might have heard but not really thought of, which is the Dasamahavidyas. So basically, the story of the Dasamahavidyas comes in the Brihadharma Purana. We have the story of Sati, where it is said that Sati actually wants to go to the Daksha Yajna, and she gets into a conversation with Shiva, and Shiva tries to not go into the conversation much. So when he tries to skip it, what happens is, it is said in the Purana that she kind of, in this particular Purana, that Sati actually locks Shiva in 10 directions. Right, and she manifests into 10 cosmic personalities, and then Shiva gets very amazed, and he asks her, what is this 10? What are these forms about? And then she explains to him. And we have Dashamahavidyas here, which I'll quickly introduce. We have Kali, followed by Tara. We also have Shodashi, otherwise known as Tripura Sundari. We also have Bhuvaneshwari. we have Chinnamasta, we also have Bhairavi, we have Dhumavati, we have Baglamukhi, and we have Matangi, as well as Kamala alias Kamalatmika. And what these women teach, this female manifestations of the goddess are very significant, because each of them have their own symbolism as well. I will not go too deep into that, but just quickly, from what I've heard in the Sanskrit channel, it talks about how Kali is seen as both destructive and compassionate, as evident from her Abhaya Mudra. And she's also representative of she gives the sadhaka control over one's ego and fearfulness. And then you have Tara, who liberates the devotee from trouble and also elevates them into physical and spiritual well-being. And you also have Shodashi, who is also known as a Saumya Murti because she's very pleasant looking. And she has complete control. She enables the devotee to have complete control over the five senses and the mind. And you also have Bhuvaneshwari, who grants success and prosperity. And then you have Chinnamasta, who seems to be very sophisticated, the image as you can see. But her worship is mainly for those who are not involved in worldly pursuits, right? So, and the fact that, the depiction of a beheaded head is actually setting aside limitations to oneself. And the idea of how she has risen above the primary needs, human needs, is something very significant in this picture. And you also have Bhairavi, who removes physical illnesses and provides stability and strength. Dhumavati, who represents raw energy depiction, also suffering of hunger. And you have Baglamukhi, which is derived from the word Valga, which means hold or control. And then it's the idea of paralyzing negative forces. And you also have Matangi, who's associated as the daughter of sage Matanga, and she provides skills in arts, wisdom, and so on. And Kamalatmika is seen as a tantric form of Lakshmi. And you also kind of have an interesting point here that I also saw in the religious sharing by the Sanskrit channel, that talks about how among all of these Dasamahavidyas, Lalita Tripura Sundari is often seen as the most suitable for anyone who's in any type of pursuit in their life, be it liberation or for their worldly needs. Shodashi, otherwise known as Lalita Tripura Sundari, is seen as the ideal deity. But all of them ultimately bestow the different types of knowledge a person seeks in their life. And that brings us to the final segment, which is about what is love, right? And many people kind of find this a very difficult topic to answer, but we can see how in terms of the Puranas and narrative retellings, you kind of see how the idea of love comes in very different, it comes in a very beautiful and insightful understanding. And this brings us to a very important person whom we cannot not talk about, who is actually Parvati. As we all know, Parvati was previously in her past birth Sati, and we all know about the immense trials and tribulations that she has went to get the man of her love, who's Lord Shiva himself. And talking about all this, we always think we tend to have a lot of questions, right? And we also some people might even think that the idea is that at the end of the day she has to take penance for Shiva because she's kind of in a way dependent. Some people think that female consorts are dependent, but some of the verses that we will come across in a while will actually kind of challenge this view. And I wanted to kind of quickly cite from the Abhirami Andadi, which was written by Abhirami Pattar. And this very important quote that I couldn't help but talk about. And it talks about, it's basically talking about the goddess herself and how, let me just quickly say this. So he talks about Vama Bhagate Vavyade. So people might wonder, what does this mean? And Vama Bhagate Vavyade basically talks about her being the better half of Shiva. But one thing very important to look at in this particular phrase is that Vama Bhagate Vavyade, the word Vavudal in Tamil itself has a very important meaning, because Vavudal does not mean receive, it means take. So as we can see in this particular phrase itself, you can see how the goddess is not receiving it, or she's not trying at the receiving end, but rather she is taking it. So the kind of liberty, the level of liberty that is depicted in this verse really reinstates how the goddess is not dependent on her consort, but rather they acknowledge each other's importance to one another, and that is true devotion. And also in this Lalita Sahasranamam, we kind of come across at the 392nd name, which is Sri Kandar the Sharirini, she who occupies half the body of Shiva. And you also have another one that says Shiva Shakti Karupini, which talks about how she who is the union of Shiva and Shakti in one form. So as you can see in all these verses and shlokas, you can see how Adipara Shakti is, or rather in this case Parvati, is kind of seen as someone who is already taking the liberty, right? She sees it as a right. So that's also something very important when considering love for in this context, because it is not about dependence. And I kind of hold the view that not all subservience is love, and not all love is derived from dependency. So this is something that we can evidently see from Parvati's relationship with Shiva itself. And people may then ask, so why did she do all these penances? But that is the thing. So when God takes on a human form, it is to lead us by example, to show, what it takes to achieve the sadhana. But for Parvati, she's transcendent, she's beyond all this. But when you are taking a human form, even God complies to the rules and regulations involved, which is why. But it's to set an example. But the fact that she kind of really shows about the power and the rights that she reinstates in her role in the Hindu pantheon itself. So when talking about women, apart from Parvati and from Puranic characters, we have had a lot of women in history who have proven about a transcendental love they have had for God. And you kind of see this as evident from Andal, which Vinodhinee had beautifully mentioned to us just now. And we also have Vengamamba from the southern part. And she saw Venkateshwara as her ultimate goal, and she dedicated her entire life to the service of Lord Venkateshwara. And of course, we have Mirabai, as Vinodhinee had mentioned. But Ray, I want to look a bit at Akka Mahadevi. So her origin is from Karnataka. She was born at Udutadi, and she had dedicated her entire life to Chenna Malika Arjuna. So basically in Kannada, Chenna means lovely, beautiful, while Mallika refers to the Lord being as white as jasmine. So the narrative goes that a king actually pursued her because of her beauty, and she had daringly declared herself to be married to no one but Lord Shiva. So you kind of see a certain retaliation or a resistance in this regard, where you see a woman who's standing up for her rights and for her preferences, which is in this case devoting herself entirely to Lord Shiva and no one else. And she had actually ended up leaving the mundane worldly life to contemplate on the divine, which to her is her loving, none other than her loving Chenna Mallikarjuna. And as A.K. Ramanujan states, she had scorned human carnal love, and she became the archetypal sister of all souls, hence earning the epithet of Akka, which means elder sister in Kannada language. So with that, I'd like to conclude my sharing thus far with this quote that I came across, where where the woman lives in grief, the whole family perishes soon, but that where they are not unhappy prospers forever. And in this case, I guess it's very relevant today, because sometimes this stereotypical notions about women tends to shackle a person's intellect, and what happens in the process is we tend to disregard or take the women in our lives for granted. But if we always remember that they play a very pivotal role in our life, and we give them the due respect and love that they truly deserve, then that house or that society shall always be there to prosper as a whole. So with that, thank you so much, and I end my presentation here.
Thank you, Losheini, for that comprehensive presentation. I think I couldn't agree more with you on the last point that you kind of said, that we need to learn how to respect each other and not disregard anyone or any any gender, regardless of man or woman. I think it's a very, very important point, because often than not, we tend to have sometimes when we are a little bit more we have a bit more knowledge, or we have a bit more resources, we tend to be a little bit more egoistic. We tend to get a little bit arrogant, and in that process we tend to forget that people may have perspectives that they have, and we forget to respect each other. So the perspective taking quality tends to get diminished at such instance. And I think that's very important. Regardless of man or woman, we must learn how to respect each other, and that's the foundation. And I think there's a very interesting question, in fact a few questions How can modern day Hindus utilize the examples that we have shared, the women saints and the important role of women in Asian Vedic society to shape the current attitude and behavior of Hindu society towards women? And there's also another question related to that, what unique Hindu practices can we then enhance in today's society to show the importance of the role of women such that men come to respect women? Maybe, I just want to reiterate some key points of my earlier presentation. I think the fundamental change that needs to happen, or rather, if it's already has happening, but needs to be even more prevalent, it's the effort to reconnect the philosophy of oneness, learning not to see that men and women are beyond just the biological difference. Biologically we may be a little different, but intellectually at the highest self we are just one. There's no difference between men and women. And I think that fundamental reconnection between the philosophy and reality needs to first happen. And for that to happen, of course, all of us need to be exposed to education. Now, in today's context, education is just not about going to school and learning the English, math, science. It has to be beyond that, especially as Hindus, as young Hindus, as we take on the role of parenthood and all in future. I think we need to make the emphasis, and we need to make it a purpose to actually educate our children, expose them to all the Puranas and mythologies, so that they will learn how to respect women, and they will also get to see women as a strong figure and not just as how women are portrayed on films as very weak. So that needs to change, because I think the moment they get exposed to Puranas, especially the Devi Mahatvam that you were just sharing about, or any other Puranas, I'm pretty sure the perception will change that women are actually not weak, women are actually strong. So the more we expose them to our mythologies, I think that is a fundamental move to change the attitude. And of course, not restricting women. I think Andal and all, they managed to get some sort of a family support, right? At one stage, they definitely get family support. So I think that's something that families also need to provide. If a woman chooses in the Grahastha state also chooses to pursue, Vedic studies or whatsoever, I think they should encourage as much as possible and make arrangements that would facilitate that, instead of saying, no, you shouldn't do that, you're a mother, you shouldn't go there. No, I think that's just stifling, and then, it again will just show that, but men can go and do anything that he wants, they can travel anywhere, but women can't travel to go and pursue their Vedic studies, for example, if they are heading to India. So something like that. So all that needs to be happening. So I think the fundamental mindset change needs to be there. A perspective-taking quality is something that we all need to absorb and demonstrate. I think if that happens, that would trigger a change or rather make the attitude and behavior towards respecting women more sustainable. Vinodhinee and Losheini, do you have any input at this point in time?
Yeah, if I can add on to exactly what you said, what is very unique to our culture, it's a duty-based culture, where the Sanatana Dharma is duty-based. So you are first supposed to do your duty, and as a like we have something called Panchamahayajnas, where you are doing a reverential contribution to your family, to your to the society, to the environment, to your culture. So once you make sure of that, like how you said, you provide the family support, so you do that duty. I think that is one very unique thing only for our culture. So if once you do your duty, automatically the others' rights are fulfilled. So this, if we concentrate on doing our duty, I think everything will fall into place by itself. That's what I feel. It's one unique practice that we can follow at any stage in our life, where we simply do our duty.
Yeah. Losheini, beyond just reforming our thinking and also, learning how to balance between our duties and also our aspirations, do you think anything else that we can do?
Yeah, I guess there needs to be a very important thing to note in this regard, because I guess we need to also think from the perspective of a child, right? Beyond all the technicalities and the theories, what we need to first do is to get them to feel the experience. I think that is what many of the people today kind of miss out in the parenting process, because we think that it is very difficult to explain to children all these profound theories, all this profound technicalities, which is precisely why we have so many stories from the Puranas, from the Itihasas, to to share with our children in a very metaphorical way about how they should and should not lead their lives, right? And of course, it starts from a very small practice, because I feel that in today's world, small things matter. And many a times that is gone unnoticed. It can be from a very small thing like letting your child inside the altar room. Many a times I've noticed this in certain households. They prevent the child from coming inside because they don't want the kid to push anything from the altar room. They don't want the lamp to drop or the incense to get burned somewhere, or all this kind of worries come about. But all this basic practice, leading back to the idea of respecting women, comes in from the small activities. When you let the child inside the altar room and let them look around, you kind of let them enhance their observations. And when they notice the presence of Devis inside the altar room, when they see their mother and father coming together as a Pati Parameshwar, some of us say, or as Pati and Patni, like what Karthik was saying, coming together to contemplate on the divine, the child then gets a message that he or she is raised in a household where women are respected, and he or she realizes that women ought to be respected. Because if we notice in today's world, how a girl or a guy reacts towards gender relations really depends on how the women are being treated in the family. So if we can show that even in our religion itself, women have so much of regard, there's so much of deference for them at that young age, they will pick it up with their picture memory. And when they grow older and when they want to know in detail what is happening, then the technical part or understanding how to do puja can come into the picture. But I think first of all, the important thing we need to inculcate in children to let them respect women is to get them inside the experience. Don't put the boundary there. It is only because Vishnu Chitta introduced Andal to contemplating on the Lord that we today have what he allowed her to talk, to engage with Ranganathan, which is why today we have an Andal. Right? If he had restricted her or told her that no, this is the way to do it, we wouldn't have had. And you see, this kind of stories of bhakti, God didn't even mind the idea of Andal wearing the garland and offering it to him, right? So they call her Sudi Kurutta Sudar Kodi, because God in fact loves them more. So teaching our children about these values rather than the technicalities would enhance their connection with God, and therefore teach them the right values in life. Yeah, that's my opinion.
Yeah. And also, I think on the questions on how, we have a lot of modern Indian Hindu female powerhouses, right? So I think why, and even in the examples that Vinodhinee had earlier shared also about the female scenes, they often provided a voice for the oppressed, and they spread messages to actually help other women regain many of the rights that they had lost with time. And so I think that needs to be also done. I think female saints need to continually concert more effort to actually inspire other women as well. I think that is one thing that can be done. And also on the ritual front, in the temples, if you realize, often than not, we actually see a lot of male priests, right? Like the males are often in the temples conducting pujas and stuff like that. And I think that could also change, if possible, maybe, having more, the presence of more female priests, or even having females, for that matter, to deliver satsangs in temple. I think that would also, because that would give a different dynamic, will bring a different change in the atmosphere, and will put the women in the lead as well. And so, like what you mentioned, children observe, right? Likewise, even men, good adults, through observations and through a change in experiences, will also be able to change their perspective, because as they see women visually given equal opportunities, even on the religious front, I think that would also change their mindset. And also, I think at this point in time, I want to emphasize another important point: the need to differentiate man-made cultural stigmas and taboos from scriptural practice. See, depriving a widow from doing certain practices and depriving a divorcee from doing certain practices, it's not mentioned in the scriptures. It's a man-made culture. So that needs to go. Anything that's discriminatory against a woman, that needs to go. But anything that is done with a purpose, the cult practices and stuff, I think that needs to stay and that needs to be respected. So that fine difference needs to be, I think we need to learn, and that can be only done through exposure to what does our scriptures say. So the more knowledge it's being spread on this about the scriptural practices, I think the better we will get in learning how to discriminate what is a man-made cultural practice, which which discriminates women, and what are the scriptural practices which respect women. I think that understanding will also definitely, because if you go back again and again, the key philosophy here that we have been talking all about here is that we are all one. We need to learn how to respect. We need to learn to see the divinity in both gender and understand that, at the subtle level, at the higher level, we are no different. So when we understand and assimilate it, I think the society will evolve into a much more integrated and a much more united, without any form of prejudice against women. On that note, Losheini and Vinodhinee, I would like to invite you to share some final words before we proceed to the closing prayer. Losheini, closing words? Any? Losheini, I think you got to unmute yourself.
Yeah, sorry. I just was saying thank you so much, Karthik, and thank you so much, Hindu Center, for this amazing opportunity. I really personally feel, as a woman myself, I personally feel that more of such discussion should continue rolling, and I guess we will gain more insights. I guess in entirety, what all these narratives we have shared, be it Vinodhinee, myself, or Karthik, whatever we have shared, really shows about how devotion to God is not technical; it's beyond, right? It's about the true love, the utmost unconditional love and devotion that we have for the Paramatma, that will lead us eventually to self-realization and attainment of the divine. So if we continue with that identity, with that understanding of the self, and if we continue showing all the utmost care and love that we have always had for God, be it God may be your friend, your lover, your family member, so on, instead of treating God as a separate entity, treat him as being a part of your life. And I feel life would be very much beautiful. And in regard of this topic, I feel that women have always played a quintessential role in defining the ways in which societies are. And I feel that we need more and more female representation, not just in leadership or in the society, but also in the spiritual world, in order for many more people to continue getting inspired by women, and also finding ways to enhance the way the world is, to make it an even more beautiful place. So thank you once again.
Thank you so much, Losheini, for your time. And Vinodhinee, over to you. Any final words?
So what we understand from this is, firstly, that there is no differentiation between man and women in our culture, first of all, which is really a very very widely misunderstood thing. And what I like about women is that they, as long as you're well intentioned, and most of them didn't mind being in the background, but their intention was such that, like, I mean women like Sharda Devi, that I told you, she was so much well in the background, but she actually made her mark. So I think that power needs to be understood. You don't have to always be in the forefront. As long as you're doing a contribution and you lead a life of contribution and beauty, I think everything will fall into place.
Right, and I think, if you want change, we got to be the change, right? So if we want society to evolve, each and every one of us, even on a daily transaction, the words that we choose to use when speaking to another woman needs to be first clear, and it needs to be out of respect. And if that can happen, then it will trickle to a much more beautiful society. And on that note, I would like to thank all of you for joining us this evening. I know we have kind of overrun by 22 minutes. I'm extremely sorry, but I hope you have enjoyed and found our presentations useful and fruitful. If you require or you would like to find out a little bit more on our presentation, you can always write to Hindu Center, and I'm sure they'll be more than happy to link us up with you. And on that note, we will proceed with the closing prayer. Right. Before we do the closing prayer, I have got some announcements. So, as you all know, this festival of Hinduism is organized by the Hindu Center. The Hindu Center is a charity formed in 1978 to promote greater awareness of Hinduism, as well as to raise the knowledge of our Vedic scriptures and practices. So, the center's activities are based on the three pillars of Jnana, Bhakti, and Seva. As you can see on the slide, each pillar supports a range of activities. So, in 2019, Hindu Center delivered over 25,000 beneficiary hours in prisons and old age homes. Your support will certainly help Hindu Center to deliver even more in the coming years. So you can make your donation at www.hinduscenter.org.sg/donations or through the QR code shown here. One-time or regular donations are welcome, so please support generously. Next, if you want to be informed of Hindu Center's activities, then sign up for the WhatsApp at our HC Broadcast Group, and you will receive timely notices of different events taking place. Send a message to the number shown here and give your name and email ID. Last but not least, thank you for your strong support so far. The festival, for the festival events coming up after this, we have the next program would be tomorrow, right? Yes, tomorrow. Yes, tomorrow. Am I seeing it correctly? Yes, tomorrow, 27, today is 26. All right, so tomorrow at 4:30, there's a numerology and Hindu calendar event, and at 7 p.m. there's live lessons from the Gita. So do join the program, and I hope you find it useful. And with that, I think we can proceed with the closing prayer.
ॐ सर्वेषां स्वस्तिर्भवतु सर्वेषां शान्तिर्भवतु सर्वेषां पूर्णं भवतु सर्वेषां मङ्गलं भवतु सर्वे भवन्तु सुखिनः सर्वे सन्तु निरामयाः सर्वे भद्राणि पश्यन्तु मा कश्चित् दुःखभाग् भवेत् ॐ शान्ति शान्ति शान्तिः